Is that really the dress you're planning to wear? Diane Parker asked loudly enough for everyone in the bridal salon to hear. A few seconds later, Ashley laughed. Then two of her friends laughed with her. By the time the room fell silent again, I had already learned something important about the family my son was about to marry into. I simply smiled and adjusted the sleeve of my dress. What none of them knew was that their future depended on a decision only I could make. My name is Margaret Bennett, and at 67 years old, I thought I understood the difference between kindness and respect. I was wrong. The bridal salon sat in one of the most expensive shopping districts in the city, surrounded by luxury boutiques and polished storefronts. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Soft music floated through the air. Everything about the place was designed to make women feel beautiful. That morning, I had arrived carrying a quiet sense of happiness. My son Ethan was getting married in less than 3 weeks. After years of raising him alone following my husband's passing, I was finally watching him build a life of his own. I had chosen a simple ivory dress for the wedding. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't covered in beads or dramatic details. It was elegant, comfortable, and timeless. At least that was what I thought when I stood in front of the mirror. The consultant helping me had smiled warmly. "You look wonderful, Margaret." Before I could thank her, Diane Parker entered the room with Ashley and several bridesmaids trailing behind her. Their conversation stopped the moment they saw me. Diane tilted her head. Ashley crossed her arms. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Then came the question, "Is that really the dress you're planning to wear?" Diane asked. I looked down at the fabric. "Yes. What?" Ashley exchanged a glance with one of her friends. "I don't know," she said with a small laugh. "It just feels kind of old-fashioned." The others chuckled. Diane stepped closer. "Well, it certainly makes a statement." More laughter followed. Not loud laughter. Not cruel laughter in the obvious sense. It was the kind of laughter that hides behind smiles and polite voices. The kind meant to remind someone that they don't belong. I felt every eye in the room shift toward me. The consultant looked uncomfortable. One bridesmaid stared at the floor. Another pretended to check her phone. I could have defended myself. I could have pointed out that the dress was purchased from the same designer Ashley had chosen for several wedding details. I could have reminded them that taste is subjective. Instead, I smoothed the fabric across my knees and smiled. "I like it," I said simply. Ashley shrugged. "That's what matters, I guess." The conversation moved on, but the atmosphere never recovered. Something had changed. Standing there beneath the chandeliers, I suddenly saw things more clearly than before. Over the past year, I had ignored dozens of little moments. Comments disguised as jokes. Invitations that somehow arrived at the last minute. Decisions made without including me. Every incident seemed small by itself. Together, they formed a picture I could no longer ignore. I watched Ashley laugh with her friends. I watched Diane direct vendors and discuss wedding details as though she alone controlled the entire event. Neither woman seemed particularly interested in hiding their opinions anymore. They believed they had already won. They believed I would keep smiling no matter how they treated me. They believed respect could be replaced with obligation. As I stood before the mirror one last time, I met my own reflection. The woman staring back at me looked calm. She looked composed. But behind that calm expression, a decision was beginning to take shape. Because while Diane and Ashley were busy laughing at my wedding dress, neither of them knew that I was preparing to invest $1.2 million into the Parker family's struggling retail business. And neither of them knew that, at that exact moment, I was starting to reconsider everything. Driving home from the bridal salon, I kept replaying the afternoon in my mind. The comments themselves were not particularly clever. The laughter was not especially loud, yet something about it stayed with me. Perhaps it was because I had spent the better part of a year convincing myself that every uncomfortable moment was simply wedding stress. Perhaps it was because I wanted Ethan to be happy so badly that I had ignored things that should have concerned me much earlier. The late afternoon sun stretched across the highway as I made my way back to my house. The place felt quieter than usual when I opened the front door. It was a large home for one person, but I had lived there for nearly 30 years. Every room carried memories. My late husband had loved the back porch. Ethan used to play basketball in the driveway until the streetlights came on. Those memories reminded me why I had worked so hard all my life. Not to collect money, not to impress people, but to create security for my family. I placed my purse on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of iced tea. Then I opened the folder sitting beside my laptop. Inside were documents related to Parker Family Outfitters, the retail business Diane and Richard had dreamed about launching. For months, they had spoken about it at family dinners. They described it as a legacy project, a business that would eventually support future generations. What they rarely mentioned to others was that the project would not exist without outside funding. Specifically, my funding, $1.2 million. The amount was substantial, but it would not damage my finances. Years earlier, after my husband passed away, I had expanded several commercial real estate investments we had started together. Those investments performed better than anyone expected. By the time I reached retirement age, I was financially comfortable. I never flaunted it. Most people assumed I lived modestly because I preferred a quiet life. I found that people revealed their true character when they did not realize how much you could actually do for them. At first, Diane had been remarkably pleasant. She called me thoughtful. She praised my business experience. She asked for advice about vendors and leases. Looking back, I realized that many conversations eventually drifted toward money. Not directly, never openly, just enough to plant expectations. Then Ashley entered Ethan's life. In the beginning, I genuinely liked her. She was ambitious, confident, and energetic. Ethan seemed happier than I had seen him in years. I wanted their future to succeed. That was why I agreed to help. But over time, subtle changes appeared. Invitations arrived later. Important decisions happened without discussion. Family gatherings increasingly revolved around the Parkers while I sat quietly at the edge of conversations. Every incident seemed insignificant on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. I stared at the investment proposal spread across my dining table. Attached to it were projections, lease agreements, inventory estimates, and expansion plans. Their excitement about the business had grown dramatically during the last few months. In hindsight, I understood why. They already considered the money theirs. Not a gift, not an investment, not a privilege, an entitlement. That realization settled heavily in the room. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the backyard. Inside, I closed the folder and rested my hand on top of it. For the first time since the engagement began, I allowed myself to ask a question I had been avoiding. If these people could not offer basic respect before receiving the money, how would they treat me after they had it? Over the next few days, I stopped looking for excuses on other people's behalf. That was new for me. For years, whenever someone disappointed me, I searched for a reason that made their behavior easier to understand. They were busy. They were stressed. They did not mean it that way. But once I started paying attention, I noticed how often those explanations protected other people at my own expense. 3 days after the bridal salon incident, Ashley invited me to lunch. At least that was how she presented it. The restaurant sat near the waterfront, one of those trendy places with floor-to-ceiling windows and menus printed on thick cream-colored paper. I arrived 10 minutes early. Ashley arrived 20 minutes late. She apologized without sounding sorry and immediately began talking about wedding expenses. Not wedding memories, not family traditions. Expenses, vendor payments, floral upgrades, additional decorations, premium guest gifts. I listened quietly, while she scrolled through photos on her phone. Every few minutes, she mentioned how expensive everything had become. Finally, she looked up and smiled. I cannot imagine planning something this big without help. I stirred my iced tea. It certainly adds up. Exactly, she said. People do not realize how much support families need these days. The comment floated between us. It sounded casual. It was not. I could hear the expectation underneath it. By the end of lunch, she had managed to discuss nearly every financial detail of the wedding without asking a single question about my life, my interests, or even how I was feeling. When we left, she hugged me for exactly long enough to be seen by nearby diners. Then she walked away while typing on her phone. That evening, Ethan called. Hearing his voice always softened something inside me. He sounded exhausted. Wedding planning seemed to consume every free moment of his life. Yet even during our conversation, I noticed changes. He interrupted more often. He seemed distracted. Several times he repeated opinions that sounded remarkably similar to Diane's. I wondered how many conversations were happening around him when I was not there. After we hung up, I sat on the back porch and watched the sunset settle across the neighborhood. The air was warm. A few children rode bicycles down the street. Everything looked peaceful, yet I could not shake the feeling that I was standing outside a circle that once included me. The following weekend provided another piece of the puzzle. Diane organized a planning meeting at her house. Vendors came and went throughout the afternoon. Samples covered the dining room table. Cake options, fabric swatches, seating charts. At one point, a venue coordinator asked who would be handling several outstanding payments. Before I could answer, Diane smiled confidently and said, "That part is already taken care of." Her eyes briefly met mine. Several people nodded as though the matter was settled. Nobody thanked me. Nobody acknowledged where the support was coming from. It was treated like a natural resource that simply existed. Later, while everyone discussed centerpieces, I stood near the kitchen doorway and watched the room. Ashley laughed with her friends. Diane directed conversations. Richard talked enthusiastically about future business plans. Not once did anyone ask whether I felt comfortable with the growing expectations surrounding me. In that moment, a quiet realization settled into place. They did not see me as family first. They saw me as a solution. And solutions, unlike people, are rarely given respect. 2 evenings later, I attended what was supposed to be a small pre-wedding dinner at Diane and Richard's house. The gathering was presented as an opportunity for both families to relax before the final rush of wedding week. By then, I had already begun looking at things differently. Instead of focusing on what people said, I paid attention to what they revealed when they thought nobody important was listening. Diane's home was full of activity when I arrived. Caterers moved through the kitchen. Boxes of decorations lined the hallway. Ashley greeted guests with practiced enthusiasm. Richard stood near the dining room, discussing business projections with anyone willing to listen. I smiled, exchanged greetings, and quietly took a seat near the back patio doors. From there, I could observe almost everyone without attracting attention. For most of the evening, conversations remained pleasant. Guests complimented the wedding plans. Family friends shared stories. Laughter drifted through the house. On the surface, everything looked exactly as it should. Yet beneath that polished image, something felt off. Shortly after dinner, I stepped away to find the restroom. The hallway leading toward the guest rooms was quieter than the rest of the house. As I rounded a corner, I heard voices coming from a partially open office door. I immediately recognized Diane's voice. "Once the funding is finalized, we can move much faster than the bank originally expected." Another voice laughed softly. "Ashley, honestly, it is the easiest money we will ever get." I stopped walking. Neither woman knew I was nearby. "We just have to make it through the wedding," Diane replied. "After that, everything becomes much simpler." Ashley laughed again. "Margaret still thinks this is about family." A few seconds of silence followed. Then Diane answered with a chuckle that sounded strangely familiar. "Well, let her think that. She likes feeling included." Included. The words settled heavily in my chest. Not respected, not appreciated. Included. As though I were a child invited to sit at the grown-ups' table for a special occasion. I remained motionless beside the hallway wall. Years of business negotiations had taught me the value of silence. People often reveal the most when they believe nobody is paying attention. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Ashley asked. "Not a chance," Diane said confidently. "She is too focused on Ethan. Besides, once the store opens, everything changes." Papers shuffled inside the room. More discussion followed about inventory, expansion plans, and projected revenue. Yet I barely heard any of it. My attention remained fixed on what had already been said. The truth was suddenly impossible to ignore. Their kindness had conditions. Their warmth had calculations attached to it. Their respect existed only as long as it served a purpose. Quietly, I turned and walked back toward the main gathering. Nobody noticed I had been gone. Ashley was laughing with guests near the fireplace. Diane carried a tray of desserts into the dining room. Richard continued discussing future success stories. The performance remained flawless. I accepted a cup of coffee and sat down. No anger showed on my face. No disappointment. No confrontation. The years had taught me something valuable. Decisions made in anger rarely improve a situation. Decisions made with clarity often change everything. As conversations continued around me, I watched the Parker family celebrate a future they believed was already secured. They spoke with confidence because they assumed every piece was in place. What they did not realize was that the most important piece of all was sitting quietly in the corner, listening, remembering, and beginning to make very different plans. The morning after the dinner, I woke before sunrise. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I made coffee, carried the mug to my kitchen table, and opened the folder containing every document related to the Parker family business. For a long time, I simply looked at the papers. The numbers had not changed overnight. The projections were still optimistic. The business model was still workable. The opportunity itself was not the problem. The people behind it were. Sunlight slowly crept across the hardwood floor as I reviewed each page one final time. I remembered the excitement in Richard's voice when he first described the concept. I remembered Diane speaking about creating something meaningful for future generations. Back then, I believed I was helping family build a dream. Now I understood that I had been helping people who viewed generosity as an obligation rather than a gift. Shortly after 9 o'clock, I called Thomas Reed. Thomas had been my attorney and financial advisor for nearly 20 years. He was careful, patient, and almost impossible to surprise. "Good morning, Margaret," he said. "You sound serious." "I need to review an investment agreement," I replied. "And I need to do it today." By noon, I was sitting across from him in his office. The room overlooked downtown buildings and busy streets below. Thomas studied the documents while I explained everything that had happened over the previous months. I described the comments, the assumptions, the conversations, and finally the discussion I overheard at Diane's house. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands and leaned back in his chair. "Do you still want to proceed?" he asked. It was a simple question, yet it felt larger than any business decision. Because the money was only one part of the situation. Ethan was the other part. My son loved Ashley. He was preparing for his wedding. Any major decision could create consequences far beyond finances. For several moments, I stared out the window. Cars moved through intersections far below. People hurried along sidewalks. Entire lives unfolded without anyone knowing the choice sitting in front of me. Finally, I answered, "No." Thomas nodded once. There was no judgment in his expression, only understanding. "Then we stop the process now," he said. The relief I felt surprised me. Not joy, not satisfaction, relief, as though I had finally stopped carrying something that had become heavier than I realized. The next hour was spent reviewing legal details. No contracts had been finalized. No funds had been transferred. Everything remained completely within my control. By the time the meeting ended, the investment was effectively frozen. Nothing would move forward without my direct authorization. Walking back to my car, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. The sky was bright blue. A warm breeze moved through the city streets. For the first time since Ethan's engagement began, I no longer felt trapped inside someone else's expectations. That evening, Ashley sent a cheerful group message about wedding logistics. Diane followed with updates about vendors and schedules. Their messages carried the same confidence as always. They spoke as though every plan remained perfectly on track. I responded politely. I wished everyone a pleasant evening. I answered questions when necessary. Nothing in my words revealed what had changed. There would be no arguments, no dramatic announcements, no emotional speeches. Some lessons arrive through conversation. Others arrive through consequences. And as wedding week finally approached, I knew the Parker family was about to discover the difference. Wedding week arrived wrapped in sunshine, polished schedules, and carefully planned smiles. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. The venue overlooked a quiet lake just outside the city. White floral arrangements lined the walkways. Guests arrived from several states. Hotel rooms filled with relatives, friends, and business acquaintances eager to celebrate Ethan and Ashley's future. Everywhere I looked, people talked about love, family, and new beginnings. Meanwhile, I carried a secret that nobody suspected. During the days leading up to the ceremony, my phone never stopped buzzing. Group messages flowed constantly. Seating charts changed. Vendor confirmations arrived. Last-minute adjustments appeared every few hours. Diane seemed especially energized. She moved through every event as though she were producing a major television broadcast. At rehearsal dinners and planning meetings, she spoke confidently about the future. More than once, I overheard discussions about the retail store. Richard described expansion opportunities. Ashley mentioned potential locations for future branches. They spoke about those plans with remarkable certainty. Listening to them felt strangely surreal. None of them knew that the foundation beneath those dreams had already shifted. The evening before the wedding, guests gathered for a welcome reception at the hotel ballroom. Soft music played while servers carried trays of appetizers through the crowd. I stood near a large window overlooking the water and watched conversations unfold around me. Ethan appeared genuinely happy. Seeing him smile reminded me why I had remained silent. This was never about punishing him. It was about protecting my own dignity. Ashley eventually joined me. She wore an elegant dress and greeted several guests before turning toward me. "Everything is finally coming together," she said. "Tomorrow is going to be amazing." I smiled. "I hope so." She glanced across the ballroom toward her parents. "My family is excited about everything happening this year. The wedding, the business, all of it." There was that confidence again, that assumption, the belief that every door ahead of them was already unlocked. I nodded politely and changed the subject. The less I said, the more comfortable people seemed to become. The next morning arrived bright and clear. Sunlight reflected off the lake as guests filled the venue. Flowers decorated every corner. Laughter echoed through outdoor gathering spaces. Professional photographers moved quietly between groups, capturing memories. I arrived early and took my seat without drawing attention. Around me, conversations flowed effortlessly. Everyone seemed relaxed. Everyone seemed certain the day would unfold exactly as expected. Diane moved from table to table greeting guests like a proud host. Richard discussed future plans with several family friends. Ashley received compliments from nearly everyone she encountered. Watching them, I noticed something I had missed before. Entitlement creates a particular kind of confidence. It convinces people that tomorrow belongs to them before tomorrow has even arrived. As the ceremony approached, I felt surprisingly calm. No anger remained. No bitterness. Only clarity. Weeks earlier, I might have questioned my decision. Now I understood it completely. Respect cannot be purchased. Appreciation cannot be demanded. And family cannot be built on assumptions. Across the venue, Diane laughed as she described how exciting the coming months would be. Guests smiled and nodded. Their futures sounded bright. Their plans sounded unstoppable. And for the moment, they still believed every one of those plans was safely within reach. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The lake shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Guests smiled as Ethan and Ashley exchanged vows. For a few hours, everything felt exactly the way a wedding should feel. Families gathered. Friends celebrated. Cameras captured moments that would be remembered for years. Sitting among the guests, I focused on Ethan's happiness. Whatever concerns I had about the Parker family, I wanted this day to remain special for him. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception hall. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across the room. White flowers decorated every table. Servers carried elegant meals from one side of the ballroom to the other. Laughter and conversation filled the air. If a stranger had walked in, they would have assumed every person there shared mutual admiration and respect. The reception progressed smoothly through dinner and speeches. Several friends spoke about Ethan and Ashley. Family members shared stories. Guests raised glasses and offered congratulations. Through it all, I remained quiet. I listened. I observed. I waited. Eventually, Richard stood near the center of the ballroom to deliver his remarks. His voice carried easily across the room. He thanked relatives for traveling long distances. He thanked friends for their support. He thanked business associates who had encouraged his future plans. Then he began discussing the next chapter awaiting their family. "This year represents more than a wedding," he said proudly. "It represents growth, opportunity, and exciting new ventures." Several guests applauded. Richard smiled. Diane beamed from her seat. Ashley squeezed Ethan's hand. Richard continued describing the future retail business. He spoke about ambition, hard work, and family commitment. Listening carefully, I noticed something missing. He thanked nearly everyone connected to the project. Vendors, advisors, supporters, friends. Yet my name never appeared. Not once. Around the room, guests nodded politely. Most of them had no idea who was responsible for making the business possible in the first place. Richard finished speaking to enthusiastic applause. As people settled back into their seats, I realized something important. The decision I had made weeks earlier was absolutely correct. Slowly I stood. At first, only a few people noticed. Then the room grew quieter. Diane looked surprised. Ashley appeared curious. Ethan smiled warmly, expecting a traditional mother of the groom speech. I returned the smile. "Thank you, Richard," I began calmly. "And congratulations to Ethan and Ashley." Guests responded with polite applause. I held a small envelope in my hand. Nothing dramatic. Nothing unusual, just a simple envelope. Today is about family, I continued. And family works best when it is built on honesty, gratitude, and mutual respect. The room remained silent. I could feel attention shifting toward me. Several months ago, I agreed to consider participating in a business investment connected to the Parker family. Diane's expression changed almost immediately. Richard sat straighter in his chair. Ashley's smile faded. After careful consideration, I decided not to move forward with that investment. Complete silence followed. No music, no conversation, no movement. It was as though the entire ballroom had stopped breathing at the same time. I placed the envelope on the table nearest me. Inside was a formal notice confirming the withdrawal of my participation. Nothing emotional, nothing personal, just facts. Across the room, Diane stared at me in disbelief. Richard's confidence vanished so quickly that it was almost startling. Ashley looked from one face to another as though waiting for someone to explain what she had just heard. Meanwhile, I remained perfectly calm, because for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer carrying the weight of other people's expectations. For several seconds after I finished speaking, nobody in the ballroom seemed capable of forming a response. The silence felt almost unreal. Guests exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked toward Richard. Others stared at Diane. A few quietly shifted in their seats as though trying to understand whether they had missed part of the conversation. I remained standing for only a moment longer before returning to my chair. There was nothing else I needed to say. The facts spoke for themselves. Richard attempted to recover first. He forced a smile and lifted his glass. "Well," he said with an uneasy laugh, "business discussions can always wait for another day." A few polite chuckles followed, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Everyone could feel it. Diane sat motionless, her expression frozen somewhere between shock and disbelief. Ashley looked at her parents, then at Ethan, then back toward me. For the first time since I had met her, she seemed genuinely uncertain. The reception eventually continued, but the energy never fully returned. Conversations became quieter. Guests who had once been discussing future plans now focused on safer topics. Beneath the music and celebration, an entirely different story had begun unfolding. The following week, reality arrived much faster than the Parker family expected. Without the funding they had assumed was guaranteed, several parts of their business plan immediately became unstable. The location they hoped to secure required financial commitments they could no longer demonstrate. Vendor agreements became more complicated. Lenders who had previously shown interest began requesting additional documentation and stronger guarantees. What had once appeared certain suddenly required difficult answers. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates. Meetings were being scheduled. Proposals were being revised. New financing options were being explored. Yet every solution seemed to create another problem. The business itself was not collapsing because it lacked potential. It was struggling because too many decisions had been built upon assumptions rather than realities. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the wedding, Ethan visited my house. We sat on the back porch overlooking the yard where he had played as a child. For several minutes, neither of us mentioned the reception. Instead, we talked about ordinary things: work, travel plans, married life. Eventually, he set down his coffee cup and looked at me. "Did something happen that I did not know about?" he asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. Then I told him the truth. Not with anger, not with exaggeration. I described the comments, the dismissive behavior, the conversations, and the assumptions surrounding the investment. Most importantly, I explained how often respect seemed conditional upon what I could provide. Ethan listened without interrupting. As the conversation continued, his expression changed. Certain moments clearly connected in his mind. Things he had previously overlooked suddenly looked different. When I finished, he stared across the yard for a long time. "I should have paid closer attention," he finally said. There was sadness in his voice, but also understanding. That conversation mattered more to me than any financial outcome. Meanwhile, tensions inside the Parker family reportedly continued growing. Plans that once sounded effortless now required sacrifices and compromises. The confidence that had filled every room before the wedding became much harder to maintain. And as those pressures increased, something else became impossible to hide. When people can no longer rely on someone else's generosity, they often reveal exactly who they are. 6 months later, the world looked very different from the way it had looked on that wedding day. Autumn leaves covered the sidewalks outside my neighborhood, and the air carried the crisp chill that always arrived before winter. One Saturday morning, I sat on my back porch with a blanket across my lap and a cup of coffee warming my hands. For the first time in a long while, life felt peaceful. The Parker family's business never completely materialized in the form they had originally imagined. They continued pursuing opportunities, but the ambitious expansion plans they once described with such certainty became far more modest. Without immediate access to easy funding, every decision required patience, discipline, and compromise. From what I heard, those realities created difficult conversations inside the family. Yet those challenges were no longer mine to solve. Around the same time, an opportunity appeared through one of my professional contacts. A widow named Susan Harper had spent years building a small specialty bakery in a neighboring town. Her products were excellent. Her reputation was strong. What she lacked was the capital needed to expand into a larger location. When we met for lunch, Susan spent very little time discussing money. Instead, she talked about employees she cared about, customers she remembered by name, and the values she hoped to preserve as the business grew. Something about her reminded me of the people I trusted most throughout my life. She spoke with gratitude instead of entitlement, respect instead of expectation. After several meetings and months of careful planning, I agreed to become an investor. Watching that partnership develop felt entirely different from my previous experience. Every discussion involved transparency. Every decision involved appreciation. Every success was shared. The business began growing steadily, and before long, the new location opened to enthusiastic support from the community. More importantly, the relationship remained healthy because it was built on mutual respect from the beginning. During those same months, Ethan and I grew closer again. Our conversations became more honest than they had been in years. One evening, while we shared dinner at my house, he looked at me across the table and said something I will never forget. "I finally understand what you were trying to tell me." There was no anger in his voice, no resentment, just maturity. Life had taught him lessons that neither of us could have forced him to learn earlier. I smiled and reached for my glass of iced tea. Sometimes understanding arrives slowly. That does not make it any less valuable when it finally appears. As for Ashley, our relationship remained polite but distant. We exchanged greetings at family gatherings. We remained civil, yet the dynamic had changed. The assumptions were gone. The expectations were gone. What remained was a clearer understanding of boundaries and consequences. Looking back now, I do not consider what happened a victory over another person. The real victory was remembering my own worth. For too long, I confused generosity with obligation. I believed keeping the peace required accepting disrespect. I thought family loyalty meant ignoring behavior that quietly diminished my dignity. I no longer believe those things. The truth is simple. Money can create opportunities. It can open doors. It can solve practical problems. But it cannot create respect where respect does not already exist. On that wedding day, some people believed the most valuable thing I could offer was financial support. They were mistaken. The most valuable thing I possessed was the ability to recognize my own value and refuse to place it in the hands of people who never appreciated it. And once I finally understood that lesson, everything else fell into place.